Welcome to our Croner Taxwise webinar programme. If you've got any questions at all, make sure you call the tax or the VAT advice line. If you're not a client, give us a call on the number on the screen.
Hello, welcome to this webinar on behalf of Croner Taxwise by myself, Mark Morton of Mercia Group Limited. And the purpose of this little webinar today is just to give you a bit of an update on HMRC inquiry powers. Some of you may have seen the Channel 4 documentary recently looking at HMRC inquiry work, and it was made to look all very exciting, verging on the borders of criminal, kicking the door in, all very exciting stuff. Obviously a lot of what HMRC do is rather more mundane than that. One of the interesting little snippets though that came out of that programme was an admittance by HMRC that they have this computer system called Connect, which collates vast amounts of third-party data and attempts to link it up with particular individuals, businesses, etc., etc. There is no doubt HMRC receive a lot of third-party information. There is no doubt they are allowed to ask for a lot of information from taxpayers. However, I think the thing to note is their powers aren't unlimited, and just because they ask doesn't mean you have to give them the information, and doesn't mean it's actually correct for them to ask. And I think this is where my big bone of contention lies. The revenue normally, if they start an inquiry, will tell you that you're under inquiry, and they'll send you a list of information that they require. At that stage, that request is informal, and they're very gently saying, please, can we have it? What HMRC do then have is a formal information power to back up that initial request, which allows them formally in writing to say, we want information which you hold or which you can obtain in your power or possession, documents similarly. We want them submitted, please, on the proviso that they are reasonably required to check your tax position. Now, the main defence for taxpayers is reasonably required. So you can appeal an information notice generally. One of the bases of appeal is it's not reasonable. One of the slight issues is you cannot appeal an information notice if the request is for what's called a statutory record. The difficulty is the definition of a statutory record is merely records you are required to keep by reference to the Taxes Acts or the VAT Acts. So really what we're saying is records which businesses keep to support their business results, records you are required to keep by reference to the VAT Act, so VAT account, invoices, details of VAT, received, paid, etc. Pay-as-you-earn information, P11D information, statutory sick pay, maternity pay, that sort of thing. They are all statutory records, and the revenue have a right to ask. However, there is their overriding proviso that any request must be reasonably required. And I regularly see the revenue start an inquiry and say, we take VAT for example, is a very simple example. Most VAT visits will want 4 years worth of information available when they turn up. Now you're pretty confident that the HMRC official is not going to turn up until after 10 in the morning and is going to be long gone by 4 in the afternoon. So why are we being asked to provide 4 years worth of data when you're fairly confident that HMRC are not going to look at most of it? I think the other thing to bear in mind is the vast majority of HMRC inquiry work nowadays is driven by computer risk assessment. So the computer has reviewed the affairs of AN individual, AN business, whatever it is, and has flagged up certain issues. So why don't the revenue ask about those issues rather than say, give me 4 years worth of data? In anybody's mind, I cannot believe that is reasonable. The difficulty is if you get an information notice for a statutory record, you can't appeal. So what I'm getting at here for inquiries, if you don't like what the revenue are asking for, you've got to have it out with them early on and ask them to justify why they believe that what they're doing is reasonable at this stage. And I think that is just good practice. You are not obliged to give everything to HMRC. You're certainly on day one not obliged to give personal bank statements, personal credit card statements. I still see that going on. That has never been acceptable and still isn't. It's just a matter of good practice. I think the final thing just to bear in mind, it is not non-cooperative to say to HMRC, please can you educate me why you're doing this? And actually, why are you asking for all this information on a disk which you want to take away, or on a data stick, or in the cloud I've seen recently, when there is actually no question directly being asked at all? Just to finalise this, I had an inquiry recently where little group of companies under inquiry, when you put together all the initial inquiry notices, the information requests rolled onto 45 pages worth. And yet within that 45 pages, there was not one specific request for data, which to me is how not to do it. Ask a specific question, fine, I'll look at the information. It is not open season. That was never the intention of Parliament. And I think you just have to draw a line in the sand sometimes, and if the revenue want to cross it, they're going to have to tell you why. So hopefully that's given you a bit of food for thought on the next HMRC inquiry that comes along. Good luck. I'm not saying it will be easy, but make them tell you. Thanks very much.